Hey everyone, today we're going to take a look at the new Marvel Legends Walgreens exclusive Baron Zemo action figure. On the front of the box we see the consistent branding with the supervillains wave that gave us Red Skull, Dormammu and the Zemo builder figure. At the top of the box it's just plain black, and down to the bottom we see some product information. Moving on to the side, there's an artwork of Baron Zemo looking on from the sinister shadows, and on to the back, that same larger artwork of Baron Zemo, description of the character, more product information at the bottom. Down to the other side is the same reflected artwork, so let's go ahead and get this figure open. Out of the box, the figure's on the plastic tray together with a sword accessory as well as two interchangeable hands. First up, we take a look at his sword accessory. This sword is a complete reuse from the sword that we got from the previous Baron Zemo action figure. This time the sword is cast in the gold plastic, silver paint for the blade, and then some brown paint on that grip. There's still some intricate detail on the hilt of the sword, so even though it's a complete reused sculpt, it's still interesting to look at. The figure by default comes with a gripping hand. This gripping hand has an up-down grip, so of course he can hold the sword well, and you can also get him to pose well with the sword. Posing well with the sword in various sinister poses. He also comes with two interchangeable gripping hands. These hands are cast in the yellow plastic. There's also really sharp applications of brown paint that go from the back of his hands down to his fingers, so that's a pretty cool design on his hands. These hands are articulated inwards as well as outwards. You can pop on those alternate gripping hands onto the figure, and this also gives you the option of holding the sword in his left hand. Having just the sword and two interchangeable hands, this figure does feel a little light on accessories. He could have definitely benefited from having a pistol just like his predecessor, and also have an alternate unmasked head with his disfigured head sculpt. His default right hand looks like it's sculpted with a trigger finger, however that index finger is sculpted together with the rest of his fingers on his hand. No big deal, you can separate his index finger from the rest of his fingers using a hobby knife. So with that modified trigger finger, he can now borrow that pistol from the previous Zemo action figure. For a disfigured head sculpt, you could probably swap it from this Deadpool action figure. However, the expression does turn out looking a little more goofy than evil, and the head sits a little high on the neck, but it's still a good option nonetheless. In terms of the overall sculpt of the figure, he's got quite a number of new parts, and that would be his head, his torso, his lower forearms, as well as his boots. The upper parts of his sleeved arms are reused from the Red Skull figure, while his lower body above his boots are reused from the typical Bucky cap mold. But the reuse of his lower body is really not obvious at all, because the new belt as well as the boots make his whole lower body look really unique. His feet also appear to be reused from Red Skull. In terms of overall proportion, he does look a little top heavy, and his broad shoulders are kind of exaggerated by the fur trimming on the sides of his shoulders, and this makes his upper body look a little bit bigger compared to his lower body. However, I don't really mind that because this makes him look more imposing and intimidating. He also comes in his more classic look compared to the previous Zemo action figure. The shades of magenta, purple as well as yellow are brighter and more vibrant compared to the old one. And the more classic looking comic book color scheme definitely makes this figure stand out more. Having a closer look at the sculpted details on this figure, and I have to say that the head sculpt looks really simple, but it's actually a phenomenal job from Hasbro. He's got a sinister expression on his face, you can see his furrowed brows beneath his mask, and there's also fine detail for his nose. White paint for the eyes are really sharply applied, and those eyes really stand out because of the dark red lining around the eyes. His headpiece is also sculpted on and painted in gold on the front, and you will notice when you move down to the sides that headpiece is actually a separate piece of golden plastic that's inserted to the sides of his head, both on the left as well as the right. The ribbed detail on his mask is also really well executed. It's sculpted on with that same dark red paint in those lines, and those lines go all the way from the front of his mask to the top of his head, and also really sharply sculpted all the way down the back of his head as well. The great thing about this ribbed detail is that when you view the figure from the front, those lines match up perfectly all the way from the top of his head to the top of his chest. So the line work is really awesome. You can even see all those matching of lines down the back of the figure as well, matching up perfectly from the back of his head down to the top of his back. So despite not coming with an alternate head, the work on the default head as well as the torso is really phenomenal. The sides of his shoulders come with fur trimming. This is sculpted in off-white plastic. Really defined sculpting to see the shape of the fur. There's black paint for the spots in the fur. The black paint looks like it's digitally applied. And having a closer look at them, they're not applied as solid black dots, but more pixelized, so this makes the spots on the fur look more organic. The fur trimming is a separate piece that's assembled and keyed into his shoulder. And being keyed into that shoulder joint means that it doesn't hinder articulation at all and follows the arm as you swing his arm all the way around. So this is definitely the gold standard when dealing with shoulder pads and shoulder armor pieces. The rest of his torso as well as his arms are cast in a purple plastic, sculpting to show the wrinkles in the fabric. His forearms are assembled as different colored plastics, purple for the top and yellow for the bottom, and that makes the separation of the colors perfect and really distinct. And now we see those brown lines painted sharply on his gloves. Moving on to the back of the figure, there's nice detailed sculpting for the musculature on his back. On his belt, it is a separate golden piece of plastic. It looks a little dull compared to the rest of the colors of the figure and could have benefited from having a coat of gold paint. Moving on to his legs, we see detailed muscle sculpting that's typical of the Bucky cap mold. And onto his boots, the fur is given the same treatment that we've seen on his shoulders. And finally, we have yellow plastic for his boots. Onto articulation, his head is on a double ball dumbbell joint, so that means you can spin his head all the way around. There's a good bit of tilt sideways. He can look down just a little bit, as well as up. Swivel hinge at his shoulders so they go all the way around, as well as coming out that far. Swivel at the bicep for 360. Double hinged pinless elbows for very good range. Swivel hinge at the wrist that goes all the way 360, as well as articulating in as well as out. And on his right hand, he's got an up-down hinge, so you can articulate his trigger hand up as well as down. He's got a mid-torso ab crunch, so you can get him to bend backwards that far as well as forward quite a good bit. That belt piece is made from a flexible plastic that would not hinder his forward ab crunch. He's got a waist swivel that's disguised by his belt piece, so you can swing him all the way around. Ball jointed hips that give you quite a good split outwards, and forward and backward with good range. Upper thigh swivel for 360 spin. Double hinge at the knees for once again good range. A boot cut that's well disguised by those fur on his boots. Ankle tilt upwards as well as downwards. And finally ankle pivot outwards as well as inwards. This figure is well designed and feels good when you start posing him because he's got Marvel Legends standard super articulation. However, he feels light on accessories and you definitely need to bring in your own weapons in order to get the most fun factor out of him. Over here I have him posed with a golden pistol that I think matches the flamboyant character design, especially with the fur trimming. And this gold pistol is actually from the Valorverse weapon pack. Bravo! Baron Zemo stands at just over 6¼ inches, and that's about 16 centimeters. For size comparisons, here he is with Red Skull and Arnim Zola, Crossbones and a Hydra Goon, Captain America and Falcon, with Iron Man and Hulk, and some S.H.I.E.L.D. agents. Here he is with some G.I. Joe Classified series, and some Star Wars Black series. Baron Zemo is an awesome figure, but I do think it could be better. He should have come with more accessories like a gun and an unmasked head. His proportions are slightly top heavy, and his belt could have used a layer of gold paint. Still, this is a fantastic figure, and its clean looks belie the thought process that went into designing this figure. It's assembled from brightly colored plastics, contributing to the clean lines and iconic comic book look for a very awesome classic Baron Zemo. This figure gets a recommend from me. Please like and share this video, let me know what you think in the comments below, and subscribe to my channel for more toy reviews. Thanks for watching, take care and stay safe.